Afternoon, guys. Welcome to Solo ReacTalk. Today, I'm going to be reacting to Soviet Gender Equality Was a Scam on the World War II YouTube channel, part of the On the Homefront playlist. Yes, if you guys want to check out my previous reactions to the other parts or episodes, remember the playlist card is going to be at the top here. Just click on it and be able to access them. If you want to check out the original video as well as World War II's YouTube channel, the links are going to be in the description below. Okay, let's start. 3, 2, 1, go.
Between the wars, women across the globe find rejuvenation in the ideal of the new woman. She can be found in magazines in smoky makeup, out dancing in the cities, or seen smoking a cigarette in the movies, dressed to complement her boyish figure. She is full of hope for a bright future. She is modern and fashionable, but most importantly, she is socially independent. In the USSR, when the new Soviet woman is promised her place in the state, she instead finds herself burdened with the roles of the tender guardian and the toiling worker. Fraught with two responsibilities, she will be far from liberated. This is On the Homefront, a sub-series of World War II in real time. I'm Anna Deinhardt. After Vladimir Lenin seizes power of Russia in the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, he is desperate to build his vision of a thriving socialist state. A character of the new Soviet individual emerges. They are to proudly uphold communist ideals, work tirelessly towards the industrial rebuilding of the nation to carry the USSR into the 20th century. But women, especially the majority in the working class, are the most oppressed section of society. But now, to fulfill the Soviet vision, Lenin needs both all the men and all the women. Speaking at the first Working Women's Congress in 1919, he promises a future where women will occupy the same position as men. You see, like in the West, tradition has confined the women to the home until now. She was to clean and care for her husband and children. But Lenin's unorthodox beliefs include that the men and women deserve to be more equal. Gender inequality is a force that, he says, crushes, strangles, stultifies and degrades the woman, chains her to the kitchen and nursery.
I agree with what Lenin is saying here. The only issue is implementation of such a goal, an aspiration. Implementation of it is going to be a bit difficult because people who live in the rural areas and people who live in the urban areas are totally different, in terms of lifestyles and their opportunities for work, whether it is men or women. And also you have to consider, the cultural aspects in terms of a family unit, destroying those cultural aspects or cultural expectations of the gender roles is going to be very difficult. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done. I'm saying it's going to be very difficult to do. And, that takes a lot of hard work. And I wonder how Lenin is going to be able to achieve that in his lifetime, because he dies and then Stalin takes over. So I'm not sure if Stalin also continued on with this project. So that's also very important. And also in terms of social and economic mobility for women, when he says that they should have as an equal opportunity like any man on the street, what does that exactly entail? Can women become judges? Can women become part of the political echelons of the country? Could one day a woman lead the USSR, essentially? How far can a woman climb up the ladder of power within the USSR? And in terms of businesses, can they also open their own businesses without the need for a permission from the husband or a permission from the head of the family, that my daughter or my niece or my wife can open this business. So yes, social and economic mobility is very important in terms of the emancipation of the womankind, if I could say like that. So yes, I agree with what Lennon is saying here. It crushes, strangles, and stratifies and degrades the woman, chains her to the kitchen and nursery. It's true. It's true. And the only issue is now trying to implement this and implement it in a way that it will benefit, the women of the USSR.
For his revolutionary vision of society, it is barbarously unproductive and petty. So, in the early years of his government, he gets started on women's emancipation. Already in 1917, Bolshevik Russia becomes the first great power to grant women the vote. In 1918, divorce is liberalized and prostitution and abortion laws are loosened. So, in the eyes of the law, Soviet women are becoming more equal to their men. Close to Lenin are two feminist revolutionaries, Alexandra Kollontai and Inessa Armand, who have considerable sway over legislation. Kollontai is the People's Commissar for Welfare, or Minister of Welfare, which in fact makes her one of, if not the first, women to hold such a position in government.
Wow. Okay. That's a good thing right there. But still, sorry guys, my throat. The gender parity within the government structures is still very skewed and supporting on men. She's like the only minister, and she's the Minister of Welfare. We need more women in that cabinet. We need more women in the echelons of power. But this is a good start. But since we've been told here that Soviet gender equality was a scam, I don't know how long is this going to last then, because like I've said before, after Lenin passes away, then it's Stalin. And with Stalin, he had his ambitions for, pushing the USSR to compete with the rest of Europe at any means necessary, at any cost. So I'm just wondering whether Lenin's dream or goal was ever going to be carried on with Stalin. Yeah, but it's a good step.
Government in the world. Anyway, together they established the Genotel, the women's section of the Communist Party, in an effort to improve women's lives. They sent representatives to other government departments to suggest reforms for women's education and work.
The unity of the working people and the Communist Party is urgent.
To encourage fairness and to stop exploitation. The new Soviet woman is at the forefront of their vision. Kollontai describes her like this. Instead of being submissive and lacking in personality, before us is no mere wife, no shadow of a man. Before us is an individual, a woman who is above all a person. The ideal takes flight in Soviet society in the magazines Rabotnitsa, the woman worker, and Krestyanka, the peasant woman. The new Soviet woman is advertised to the female population. But Lenin and his supporters sees this as a more than an ideal. It is an integral part of his socialist reform meant to modernize society. Collectivization will free up women to be productive workers. As Kollontai writes in 1921, in order to give women the possibility of participating in productive labor without violating her nature or breaking with maternity, it is necessary for the collective to assume all the cares of motherhood that have weighed so heavily on women, thus recognizing that the task of bringing up children ceases to be a function of the private family and becomes a social function of the state. So, the Genotel establishes public laundries, kitchens, and childcare centers to provide cleaning, food, and day-to-day care for children. These kind of institutions spring up everywhere. For instance, In only a few years, there's 200 new consultation centers for pregnant women to receive support. In the cities, these institutions quickly become heavily relied upon. In Petrograd, 90% of the population and 60% in Moscow are soon fed through communal kitchens. But while it may seem that the women of the Soviet Union hit the ground running towards gaining social, political, and economic equalities, this new system only shifts the gender roles as they are to the collective. Those contributing to the home and rearing to the community's children, the cleaners, cooks, nurses, and teachers are women. So
yeah, it is a scam. It is a scam. It is a scam. Because the gender roles are still existing, only in name are they having, the chance or the opportunities like any other man on the street, only in name. But then in practicality, it seems as if women are still going to be doing, the gender expectations, the gender roles expectations, where they must be the ones cooking, teaching, cleaning, but you don't hear men participating in that line of work, That means that the society is still expecting men to be the heavy lifters, the people who, build the machinery, the people who farm the lands, and people who are the political class of the USSR. So, yeah. The Ministry of Welfare, I'm just wondering, what is it doing to redress this situation, And yeah, as a collective, the responsibility is still heavily weighed upon the women. We don't hear anything about the men, And yeah, it's just not working. It's just not working.
Children remain a female matter and her natural calling. In effect, all it does is shift women's traditional role into a public setting. The feminist efforts are not meant to liberate a woman for her own sake, but more for the sake of the smooth functioning of socialist society. Or, as Kollontai puts it, she no longer belongs to herself, she is serving the collective, producing from her own flesh and blood a new unit of labor.
But nothing about the men doing the same, nothing. It's only the women. Yeah.
In other words, raising the next generation of workers. In any case, it's only a small part of women who gets a taste of the changes happening around them. The majority of the female population of 70 million is scattered across a huge body of land, in rural clusters and far away from many of these new services. But following Lenin's death in 1924, Joseph Stalin comes to power in 1927, and women are now called upon by the nation unlike ever before. Stalin is hellbent on getting the USSR equal in industrial strength to other world powers. In 1931, he proclaims, "We have fallen behind the advanced countries by 50 to 100 years. We must close that gap in 10 years. In 1933, Stalin's second five-year plan to rapidly industrialize skyrockets the demand for labor. It is a huge national effort that simply can't afford to exclude the female population. Between 1928 and 1937, 6.6 million women take on industrial jobs previously dominated by men. Women.
But the leadership structure of these construction, collectivism companies or troops, I don't know how to explain or describe what, these people who are working, but it's still led by men, the middle management, the higher management, all the way to the political side of the governors or the mayors or the provincial state leaderships. All of these structures are still heavily led by men. And this social and economic mobility of the women is still very much, centered around the labor aspect, having women build homes or build factories, but you don't really hear of any women actually in the leadership structure or leadership roles of these respective industries, you know. And also, like, yes, in World War II, there were women who entered into the military and, you know, who were serving in the USSR military, if I'm not mistaken. But still, it's not enough, you know, it's just not enough. And like I said before, with Stalin and his ambitions, I'm just wondering how long will this initiative last, you know, in trying to reform and redesign the USSR's society, especially between men and women, because it doesn't seem like it's going to head to a very nice place, essentially, you know, because it seems to me that the women are still doing the labor work, and of course they also have to now be taking care of their families at home. They have to be taking care of those duties as well as a woman in the house. And yeah, there still isn't much of a shared collectivism, you know, initiative where men also take responsibility, also do the chores that were previously considered only meant for women, you know. So yeah.
Flock to the cities and take up positions in construction, railroads, mining, metallurgy, and machine production. In 1930, women only make up 28% of the industrial workforce. By 1937, they make up 42%. And now these changes start to transform the rural parts of the Soviet Union too, as mechanization and collectivization of farms transform rural women's lives too. So now the Soviet woman has a purpose outside the home, beyond her responsibilities as a caregiver. And while a woman's role in society becomes more similar to her husband, birth rates drop and family sizes decreases. So women are less dependent upon the household and the domestic workload is somewhat shared. And the reforms continue to restructure the family in the Stalinist era. In 1927, a new code on marriage, the family, and guardianship extends women's social rights to the home. Obtaining a divorce is now easier, which leads to such an increase that in cities 20% of married men and 17% of married women are getting divorced. In families who are desperately poor, easier divorces increases the risk of women being left as the only earner and carer for the family. As one journalist writes, "What sort of position is this woman in? Are her interests protected by the new code? Of course not." And just like in their personal lives, there's little security in Soviet women's new role as a worker too. Remember the Genotel that was established to protect women? Well, that's closed down in 1930. And as women enter industrial work, wages plummet by 49% between 1928 and 1932.
The scam is in full effect now.
If the number of workers double, but wages are cut in half, well, I'll let you do the math. Clearly, women aren't experiencing any increased independence from their husbands. Instead, their jobs are making up for the man's smaller income. And as Stalin tries to stabilize the changing society, what little progress women have made to become independent is truly derailed. In June 1936, policies are passed to restore conservative family values. See, there are fears growing that the family unit is being neglected and that this will result in dwindling populations and less workers.
And ultimately, that's what countries need. They need populations to continue on their march into economic growth or military conquest, or, you know, just to be a very powerful center of influence on the planet. You know, countries need high levels of population, especially a country as vast and, you know, as complicated as the USSR. It needs a large population base to maintain itself. And yeah, you know, politicians and the leadership structure, they will throw out this initiative in the name of making sure that the USSR continues to grow.
So, obtaining an abortion or a divorce become a tougher task. Reinforcing their role as a mother, the state creates incentives for women to prioritize having children rather than going to work. For 7 or more children, a woman is granted 2,000 rubles per child for 5 years. Mothers with 11 children are granted 5,000 rubles per additional child for 1 year and 3,000 rubles for a further 4 years.
Wow. Wow.
As war looms and the industrial wheels spin faster and faster, true equality between Soviet men and women remains out of reach. The pre-revolutionary conception of the woman seemed to have prevailed over the new woman ideal. But the structure of society and the economy is increasingly relying on a woman's blood, sweat, and tears. First, she must carry her own family. Then, she is asked to raise the family of the nation. And finally, the nation requires her contributions to industrial production. Instead of equality, the socialist reforms have only added to the woman's burdens, while men remain in their main roles as workers and soldiers, just like before the revolution. The socially liberated new Soviet woman is a hoax and only lives in illustrations of communist propaganda. And once the USSR will join the war, Soviet women will again be urged to take on yet another traditionally male burden, to join the war industries and even to become soldiers and face the horrors of battle. Now, I'll get back to Soviet women on the fronts in later episodes. If you want to know more about Stalin's industrialization, we have covered that in Between Two Wars right here. It is thanks to the Time Ghost Army that we can continue doing these series even in these trying times. Join the Time Ghost Army at patreon.com or timeghost.tv. Subscribe and ring that bell. But most importantly, stay safe and stay healthy.
Yes, guys, that is it with Soviet Gender Equality Was a Scam on the World War II YouTube channel, on the Homefront playlist. Yeah, it was a scam, really. It had good intentions in the beginning, you know, with Lenin and his goal for equality for both men and women. However, it was too big of a dream, and it could not be completed in his lifetime. And Stalin had his own dreams, his own ambitions, and should anything come into into his path of achieving that goal, he'll demolish it immediately. And that's what happened with the welfare ministry, you know. That ministry was on, should I say, it was on a shoestring, you know, or maybe let me say this. Its existence depended on the mercy or the understanding of the dictator, you know. With Lenin, he created this ministry. He supported it wholeheartedly because it was part of his mission and his vision for the USSR. But now that Stalin is in and he's now the new dictator, you know, he just pushes it aside and says it's no longer worthy of being an effective tool in our government. So yeah, literally this welfare ministry was at the mercy of the dictator that was in power, which is unfortunate. It is unfortunate because there was still a lot of work to do in terms of you know, social and economic mobility for women, emancipation for women in the USSR. And yes, like I said before, it was a very good goal to try and achieve. It's just implementation and the time necessary or the time required to achieve the goals. And you know, also these gender roles or expectations in society, this kind of cultural aspect, it will take a long time to erase something like that. It will take a very long time to erase something like that, especially because, you know, it's always been seen that, you know, men must be the one to be doing the heavy lifting, the construction jobs. They must be the ones in power. They must be the ones who do the important things centered around the state. And then, you know, women should be the ones to be staying at home, taking care of the children, you know, and being the cleaners or the cookers, or the you know, people who do like less important jobs for the state, if I can say that. So yeah, there was still a lot of work to do in terms of unlearning, you know, these social norms and roles that we have put between men and women. You know, there still had to be a lot of unlearning of that, and to apply the thought process of equality. And, you know, women are people too. Women are not second-class citizens. And yeah, guys, that is it. That is it for today. With Soviet gender equality was a scam on the World War II YouTube channel. If you guys want to check out the original video as well as World War II YouTube channel, the links are going to be in the description below. If you like my reaction, please give me a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Click on the notification bell if you want to be up to date with my latest videos. And I'll see you guys next time. Okay? Bye-bye.